No! No! Why is it that the Swiss make such good guns? I thought they were neutral. What are they hiding? But before we get into that, we of course have to talk about the fact that this is all free, and it's kept free by our sponsors, who are amazing. So go ahead and give a lot of love to Primary Arms. If you're not familiar, Primary Arms is our biggest sponsor, and all of their optics are not made in Idaho, but it'd be pretty cool if they were. Now, nonetheless, they're 1 to 8, they're HTX. All these optics are some of our favorites. They make awesome pistol optics, awesome rifle optics. Go ahead and hit them up. It is Spooky October. Tell them the spookiest skeleton story that you have. Just try. And of course, we have Henry Repeating Arms. Now, here's the thing. If you're looking to be more American, if you're looking just to have a little bit of Americana in your life, well, Henry rifles are made in America or not made at all. So we love them. This is a 17 HMR. We're actually going to be doing a video on this little bad boy right here. And to answer the question about how American are Henry Repeating Arms, we have Preston. Preston, how you can look at him. Preston, how good are they?
At least 11 out of 10 for sure.
Preston's also not paid by them, so you know that means it's good. If you want to become a better shooter, we of course have Mantis Firearms. They're going to turn your weapon into a dry fire machine. We love them so much. Go and check them out here. We have Connor shooting it. He's from the Army, which means he's what, Preston? Retarded. Yeah.
Who's Connor? What?
Connor, his brother.
Oh, right.
We have a video.
Wow.
It's like you don't even watch the videos.
Yeah, Preston doesn't watch the videos, confirmed.
Now, it's important to give a big shout out to Axe Arms. They did provide this to us to do the video. This allows us to keep a little bit of distance from companies when we're doing any type of review, but more important, Axe Arms, AX Arms are amazing. They are the major B&T distributor, and beyond that, they have all the coolest stuff. So go ahead and check them out. Give them an email, say, man, I love B&T. And I love weird imports, and ask them for a weird import. You never know.
Of course, all ammunition is sponsored for by AAC, so we are shooting primarily 124 grain NATO. And you know what? Talk is cheap. Ammunition is sponsored by AAC. Let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about the KH9 SD. The KH9 is a very interesting weapon. It essentially comes down to autism. If you gave the owner of a company complete power to make whatever he wanted, what would he make? Well, he'd become obsessed with guns from the 80s like I do and try to recreate the SITES Spectre, which he did a very good job of. So right here we have the KH9 SD, which stands for Karl's Hobby 9 SD. Who is Karl? It's Karl, the owner of the company of B&T. Today we're going to be talking about the KH9 SD. There's so much weird stuff about this, so much weird history that goes on, but as always, we're going to break it down to you from a shooter's perspective and talk about this very compelling firearm. Today on Garand Thumb, Autism. So we have the KH9 SD here. Now, a lot of questions of what does the SD stand for? It stands for super duper quiet, shell damper, sound dampener, suppressor. This is an integrally suppressed weapon. So the suppressor actually extends back and over the barrel, and much like the MP5 SD, it also has ports just forward of the chamber so that when this weapon fires, it bleeds off the energy from those rounds. So any of your typical 9mm rounds are going to be brought below the speed of sound, which makes this to be a very incredibly quiet weapon. Now, the suppressor is not as big as an MP5 SD or other integrally suppressed devices, but it is still quite quiet, and I think it strikes a good balance between reliability and sound performance. So first thing we're going to do is prove to you that this thing is actually making the guns, travel below the speed of sound. So first up, we have a TP9. We're going to fire that right over the top here. Okay, so we have this one traveling about 1100, slightly over, depending on the round that's fired. This is typical of most of your 124 grain rounds, so that is above the speed of sound, which here is about 1080. So let's go ahead, let's try it with the SD. So we average about 990 to about 1,000 feet per second. That's well below the speed of sound, and explains why this gun is so quiet. When a round is going above the speed of sound, it's going to create that supersonic crack as it breaks the sound barrier. That's why this guy is so quiet, hence SD. Now, there's a lot to talk about this thing. We're going to delve into the autistic details, but to start with, let's take a look at its performance, what it's like to shoot, and then we'll get into autism. So first off, we're going to be starting with the field drills. The first drill is going to be a bill drill. 6 rounds, 7 yards. We're going to try to do it under 2 seconds, and We're just testing how well the trigger works, how good the recoil is, and recoil control. It's a skill test mostly, but it's a good thing to try out on your firearms. Preston, you ready? Didn't catch it all. It's too quiet. We'll put it next to the chamber. Let's take a look at this group right here. Awesome. Very, very good group. Let's try and see if Preston can do a good job this time. Oh, 134. Let's go. We have a very tight grouping on this guy. Excellent performance. One thing that we have to talk about is how good the recoil on it is. So if you'll come over to the side right here, do a little recoil test, you're going to see that this thing really does not move much. It's a fairly simplistic design. It's a blowback design, although extremely precisely engineered by the Swiss, who for some reason make guns despite being neutral. All right. Anyhow. So super smooth to shoot, just an absolute dream. And, you know, it's kind of odd. You know, being a direct blowback weapon, you'd really think it would recoil more. But man, with the suppressor, obviously we have accessories out here. The gun is just not moving. Next up, let's go ahead and let's try a transition drill. The only transition that we like here on Grand Thumb. We're gonna be doing 2 and 2. We got 2 A zone, and we have a line break, but that's still A zone because it's touching the A, therefore. 2 good shots right there. Let's finish with the Mozambique. We'll do a little bit of first shooting here. See how we're doing. We're gonna do 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. You know, this gun really feels like a nail gun, you know, just no noise. All right, we got 2 to the A zone, 1 to the head. Very simplistic gun to fire. Easy to just get exactly where you need it. Now, these rounds are traveling slower, so let's see what the repeatability is in terms of accuracy at this guy. Let's go check it out. Okay, so right here, we got targets about 130-ish, and we're gonna attempt to make some impacts here. See, I feel like I was aiming at the same location.
Yeah, now you're hitting under it.
Really?
Yeah. So the last 3 shots, you were like, they would have been like hitting the kneecap basically. Just right edge.
You know what? Shooting far with SD guns is not fun because as the energy is being bled out behind it, you just have a variation in your feet per second on the round that can make some long shots a little bit hard. I'm definitely on struggle bus when it comes to the KH9 SD. You know what? You can definitely do it. There's some variability there. You can see where I'm aiming at the same location. I am getting some low. I think that's that FPS change that we're seeing. Doable, just definitely not the gun's forte. Here's what blows my mind. Between the TP9 and the KH9, they look to be, well, the KH9 looks to be much larger than the TP9. However, if we put them side by side, we actually measure up the stocks on each other, they're actually just about the same size. Now, a quick note, this is the newer compact can for the TP9. This is an older, larger version for the SD can. So with the older can, they're about the same length. That always kind of blew my mind because it doesn't feel like it should be true. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That shouldn't be, that's not right. But the KH9 is about, for all intents and purposes, about the same size as the TP9. Definitely smaller when it's compact all the way. So we'll definitely give it to it there. But I thought that fact was a little bit interesting when it comes to these 2 guns, both made by B&T. Okay, let's see how fast this guy is. Next up, we're going to be talking about the speed of the trigger and reload. So first off, this is a very odd gun. It's a single action, double action. It's a very odd trigger, and we'll blame the SITES Spectre for that. But compared to like the TP9, it's a much better trigger. Compared to like the APC 9K, it's a little bit worse, but you can see it's still not that bad to run it fairly fast. So let's give it a few tries here. Okay, now, once we go to bolt lock, if you notice, there's no provision to hold the bolt back on the KH9 SD SITES Spectre, although these followers do allow for a bolt hold open feature, so it's kind of odd. Now, you can hold the bolt back manually by hitting this button right here. So you pull back on the charging handle, push down on that, and it will lock it back so that when you load your next mag, or if you're doing like an administrative load, you just hit that and rack it. But generally, how your reloads are done is you're going to eject the first mag, fresh mag in, and then rack it. So right here we have the dynamic range X1. We have Ron Jeremy and Macaulay Culkin here. So I'm going to be attempting to put headshots into Ron Jeremy as the target is moving. It's a really cool little system. They sent it to us to evaluate, so we'll try it out here today. Okay, ready. You suck.
New guy.
Oh, how do you suck so bad? You had a 50% chance of getting it right.
And he went left.
It's still going.
He's tweaking, bro. I just turned it off and it's still going. Like I said, I still haven't figured this shit out.
Look how mad he is.
Oh, no, gang. Oh, no, let's go that way.
You know what? I crushed it. Ron Jeremy's dead. All right, we'll try that one more time. All right, let's go check it out. First off, doing a little bit of movement on a target, super fun. Ron Jeremy is dead. The child is also dead, which means that there's nothing we got to worry about anymore. Well, we've done a lot of shooting at this point. Let's do a little bit of talking. Let's go into the black screen room and let's do some autism breakdowns.
So we have done a lot of shooting. Now we're going to do a lot of talking. Now, quick note, I do have a cold that was very graciously given to me by my kids. If you have kids, you understand, but the show goes on. Isn't that right, Sawyer?
Dude, I'm gonna get this cold. I'm so pissed.
The show always goes on. All right, gentlemen, this is a very interesting firearm. It came about simply because a gun designer thought guns were cool, and I can think of nothing more awesome than a gun designer just loving guns so much that he lets his autism take control. So Karl Brügger, who is the founder of B&T, loves the SITES Spectre. If you're not familiar with the SITES Spectre, it was a short-lived Italian submachine gun. I say short-lived, but it did pretty well. The problem that the SITES Spectre ran into was that, well, it came about during the assault weapons ban. So ultimately, it really just got cut down before it could really hit its prime. Despite that, you can still get your hands on them. You just don't see a lot of them anymore, and it's a very interesting, very nostalgic design. In every way, when you think about a submachine gun design in the 80s, the SITES Spectre is it. And of course, it was famously in your favorite first-person shooter, GoldenEye 007. Karl Brügger loved the SITES Spectre so much, he thought to himself, well, why don't I bring it back? So he looked at first acquiring the original machinery used to make the SITES Spectre. However, it was destroyed by those dang Italians. So he thought to himself, well, you know what? I'm a gun designer. I can make this. And so he did. And we now have the KH9, as well as this model right here, which is the KH9 SD. Now, if you know anything about B&T, you will know that they have a proclivity towards bringing very weird, forgotten firearms and giving it just all of the love with Swiss just precision. And that definitely comes into play when it comes to the KH9 SD. A lot of people have looked at this and they said, you know what, it looks like a modernized Thompson. And you know what, in many ways it does. And in fact, later models of the Thompson, which did away with the Blish mechanism, were primarily blowback operated. So indeed, in many ways, you could say this also looks a lot like a Thompson, although that was not specifically intentional. It's just that both the Thompson and the KH9 SD looked like something you would have drawn when you were 7 and someone said, draw a submachine gun. This is probably exactly what you would have drawn. With all that being said, we're not here to give you a history lesson on the KH9 SD. Rather, we're here to bring it to you in terms of a shooter's perspective. What is it like to shoot this gun, to maintain it, to load it, to operate it? That's what's really going to matter. Now, before we get into this, we of course have to do our full disclosure. This weapon is not from B&T, although it is made by B&T. This weapon was provided to us by AX Arms. Now, they are absolutely incredible. If you know anything about them, you know that they are the premier B&T dealer, so we want to give them a lot of love. And more importantly, you should email them right now and say what odd B&T weapon you want them to import. Or beyond that, they also import a lot of very odd, very eclectic weapons. So go ahead and email them, give them your wish list, and say how much you love them because they are absolutely amazing. A big thank you to them. Let's get into this. It should be noted, obviously, that we do have contacts at B&T, although we did not specifically talk with anyone at B&T when it came to this particular weapon. Let's go ahead and let's launch into it. Now, this right here is an SD model. Now, SD stands for Channel Damper or Super Duper Quiet, as Karl would often say, but essentially what you're doing is you have ports just forward of the chamber. As the weapon fires, this bleeds off energy behind the 9mm round, bringing almost all of your 9mm down to a subsonic speed. This means that it does not make a supersonic crack, makes for a very quiet weapon. Now, compared to the MP5SD, a lot of people have said that they're fairly similar. I find that the MP5SD is psychotically quiet. The KH9 SD is also very quiet, but it doesn't quite have the internal volume that the MP5SD suppressor has. In addition to this, this is also a reduced back pressure model, which means that there's more of a flow-through design element to it. All this comes into play to mean that this weapon is a little bit louder than the MP5SD and has a much more distinctive chatter compared to the SD. It also means that this has a very distinctive chatter compared to the MP5SD because unlike the SD, it is not a roller delayed system. This is a direct blowback system. So what happens is when you pull the trigger on this, you have a large chunk of metal that's coming forward in the striker mechanism to hit the firing pin in order to actuate it and vent the primer, cause the weapon to go off. Because of this, it sounds very much so like a paintball gun. It sounds like a nail gun. It doesn't quite sound like a gun in many ways due to the SD nature of it. It's a very distinctive weapon in terms of its firing signature, and I'm sure you guys have heard that. Now, we've talked a lot about the suppressor, but let's actually go ahead and take the suppressor off so you guys can take a look at it so you guys can see what we're talking about. I'm sure this is going to be a very funny edit from Sawyer. Okay, so if you know anything about SD firearms, well, first off, suppressor. You can see this is extending over the barrel, not a whole lot of internal volume. This is merely to bleed off a lot of the energy. And then we have most of our volume right here. Now, B&T suppressors, if you don't know, are some of the most prolific in the world. They know how to make suppressors very well. And this is a very well-engineered model. It does really well for its size and weight class. On the firearm itself, you can see that you have the barrel. It's kind of hard to see the ports behind there. We'll try to get Sawyer to get a shot of those. But it is a very well-designed firearm. And the thing about an SD is that they become very dirty very quickly. And we'll talk about that right now, but the thing we do have to note is you should be cleaning these ports and the barrel with a specifically designed tool, just like the MP5SD. It's a brush that basically deep throats the barrel, cleans out those ports, and makes sure that it's working really well. So you need to make sure that you are maintaining your SD weapons because they will shut down and they will carbon lock and they will cease to function. And that is definitely true of this as well. The thing I do want to note is due to the fact that this is not a roller delayed weapon, this is a direct blowback, it primarily is going to function by means of weight with the bolt as well as spring pressure. So compared to the SD, I do find that the KH9 SD is actually a slightly more reliable weapon overall. And in addition to that, I think that the blowback design really does lend itself well to the SD. The problem with the SD, as you know, or any SD model, is that it becomes dirty very quickly. A roller delayed weapon is a very labor intensive weapon, even when it's not suppressed. With a direct blowback weapon, they are more reliable, although they have a harsher recoil. So although this does have a harsher recoil compared to the MP5SD, it's still very controllable, very easy to shoot. In addition to that, with that blowback design, it ends up being very reliable. That is something that it will definitely count towards being a good thing on the KH9 SD. I think that they did a wonderful job with it. moving out to the rails right here, or the handguard that comes over the suppressor, because the internal diameter right around the barrel is smaller compared to the MP5 SD, you can have a much slimmer handguard. So we have Picatinny at both the 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock, and then we have M-LOK on the 3 o'clock and on the 9 o'clock. It's a very well-designed handguard, and I love the size. Not that there's anything wrong with the MP5 SD, but this is definitely a good touch of Swiss engineering that has made this gun absolutely incredible to hold and to shoot. Everything about B&T is very precise at their machining. They're very, very good at what they do. All the memes and the jokes about, you know, runs like a Swiss watch, etc., definitely is true when it comes to their firearms. It's just, they are a real beauty to hold, and that goes to for every B&T firearm. I sound like a shill, they don't pay me, I just love B&T weapons. So let's go ahead and let's take a look and let's see how this compares to the GHM9. If you're familiar, the GHM9 is a very similar weapon that is well loved within the B&T community and within the subgun community. You also, of course, have the APC-9K, APC-9. These are weapons that are actually adopted by the United States military. So when we talk about B&T having a pedigree of making high quality firearms, it definitely is true when it comes to it, and the KH9 is no slouch as well. Now, with your GHM9s, they typically have lowers that are compatible with the APC-9s or certain other B&T subguns. The KH9 is its own little deal, and there's several reasons for that. One, we of course have the top mounting charging handle. This is what a lot of people will look at and compare it immediately to a Thompson submachine gun. Now, obviously with the military models of the Thompson, the M1A1, you have the charging handle on the side. But the earlier models, the 1928, etc., do have that charging handle on top. And so for a lot of people, when they look at this, they say, ah, the Tommy gun, welcome back, Tommy gun. And in fact, a quick note here, they are actually making a KH45 SD. So the same thing, but in 45. And when we do the video on that one, we're definitely going to say, welcome back, Thompson submachine gun. You know, we missed you so much. Moving on to the magazine well, the reason why this looks so odd compared to the GHM9 is the fact that this magazine well is interchangeable. So one of the things that made the SITES Spectre so cool is it used a very interesting coffin style quad stacked magazine that held 50 rounds, but was quite short. It was very interesting for the time. And Karl Brügger obviously loved that design. So when he designed this, he wanted it to be able to use those original SITES Spectre magazines. And indeed, the first KH9s did. However, there's not a lot of them. He couldn't buy the tooling to make more. So there was kind of a problem. You know, you can buy this gun that takes a SITES Spectre magazine, yet the SITES Spectre magazines are basically unobtainium. Hard to make. So what he came up with was that there's an adapter that can use the Suomi mags very easily. Now these are very similar in that they are a wide stacked magazine. Although maybe not as cool as the SITES Spectre, they are still very interesting to use. So you can use those coffin mags, and you can also use the Suomi drum mags as well. This is cool. It's a very simple adapter. It's 50 bucks, and you can install those no problem whatsoever, and also adds just a very cool, very traditional mag catch on there. I think that's a very cool design. On ours, we didn't do it because frankly, they can be a little bit finicky in terms of the drum and the magazines, and they're not super expensive. In fact, I would consider them to be very reasonably priced, but we mostly wanted to focus on the B&T specific magazines because they look so cool, and we're very big fans of the B&T mags. But you should be aware that the KH9 is easily converted over to those magazines, and that's a vibe right there. In fact, with the drum mag on there, we really should say, welcome back, Tommy gun. So, and a quick note, of course, Axe Arms does have those. That was a wink, but I'm a little sick, so it's kind of hard to wink right now. Now, when you do have a magazine that has some pressure pushing up on the bolt, so what I mean by that is you have a nearly full mag or like a half full mag, it can be difficult to remove the magazines. You can see this in a lot of videos of people shooting the KH9 SD. You really have to make sure that you get that depressed all the way in. It's not too hard on the right side of the magazine, but you also have the left side release. And due to kind of the space between your grip and where the magazine release is, a lot of people do end up just using the mag release right here, because if you're using it, you're simply reaching back, you're hitting this guy right there, and then you can release it. As you can see, you really have to depress it. Jesus.
there we go, quite far, and kind of with a forward kind of force to get it to release. That can be a little bit of a pain compared to, some other designs out there. And if we use it with like the smaller mags, we have a 20 round mag right here. Let's see if we have the same thing. Easy release on the right side. And sure enough, on the left-hand release, it just doesn't work as well. So the thing we'll say about that is the left side release is just a little bit finicky compared to the right side, but this is of course cured if you put the magazine adapter in there. It looks pretty cool with the short mag, doesn't it?
It actually does. It looks
Yeah.
really sick.
Looks really, it's like the 1928 with the 20 round mags. Kind of neato. Now the manual of arms on the KH9 SD is a little bit odd. So although these magazines will obviously lock a bolt back on the APC9, the SPC, the TP9, the MP9, for whatever reason, probably due to the fact that we want it to be as close to a SITES Spectre as possible, this does not lock back on an empty magazine. When you fire this gun and you go to the last round, the bolt's just gonna come back and put that safety off. that whenever you fire that weapon, it sounds significant, but you'll just get that click. So you actually need to put your new mag in. As soon as you seat that next mag, we'll eject the old, new mag in, and then rack it. It actually looks pretty cool. It's a cool reload process. It's very much so like many other weapons that don't have a bolt hold up open option, such as the FNC, AK, etc., etc. There is a reason for doing it. The kind of general thought process is if you have a gun that locks back on an empty magazine, if you're in a very austere environment, very dirty, muddy, environmental factors come into play, that open ejection port can lead to an ingress of dust, debris, material that could potentially shut the weapon down. So there is a method to the madness as well. When you don't have a bolt hold open, you have less parts on the gun. In very cold, very rough environments, this can actually make a lot of sense. But it probably wasn't necessary, but it is cool in terms of a throwback to the SITES Spectre, so we do have to give it to them there. Now, moving from there, we of course have the magazines. So when it comes to the magazines, we are using the B&T mags. These are obviously what fits in here. And you have a lot of different sizes that you can go with. Now, the big thing on the B&T mags is that when you have these mags and you don't have any type of bumper plate on them, we have found that they can crack. What we generally recommend is that you buy the pads that you can put on the bottoms of the mags. You can also put a little bit of tape with something to kind of dampen the impact on a hard environment, especially like concrete or stuff. They won't crack on an empty mag, not from what we've seen at least, but if you have a partially loaded mag, that weight can definitely cause it to crack over time. These magazines aren't, I wouldn't say fragile, but I would definitely say that they should come factory with these base pads on there. In fact, with many military contracts, you do see a different polymer used as well as base pads coming with them. Now, I do love the mags. I think they look super cool, especially being translucent. You can definitely easily see what your level is of ammunition. It makes it very easy to check it on the fly. Now, moving back from there, we have the trigger, we have the safety. Now, there's a couple of very interesting things about this. It is a blowback design, but the SITES Spectre was very interesting in that once you loaded it, there's no safety on it. It was simply a decocker. So you could simply decock the gun, keep it with that round in the chamber, just like a revolver, and once you're ready to fire, you'd simply pull that trigger, you'd have a long double action pull, and then it would go to single action. That is exactly what the KH9 SD has. So you have a long double action pull, you have a decocker, and then you have a single action pull. We're primarily going to be talking about the single action pull because compared to later models, these ones that came in from Axe Arms actually have the updated lowers that have the safe, fire, and decocker option. So let's go ahead, and we have it on safe right now. Now, as you can see, trigger won't pull, put it into fire. It's no problem. So let's go ahead, put your finger over mine. Let's do a little bit of Unchained Melody as we test out this trigger right here. So we have a good amount of play right here, about 5 millimeters. Once we hit that wall, very mushy, and a light let off. That being said, from the reset, very long. There's a reset right there off that wall. Now, once you actually pull the trigger, it's about a 3 to 3.5 pound pull. It's just mushy. So when we compare that to something like an MP5, I would say the trigger is a little bit better than MP5 due to the fact that it's so light. In fact, in shooting in semi-auto, it's been a real dream to shoot. We've actually been able to push this gun very fast. Now here's the problem. Compared to like the KH9 and the APC,
due to the fact that it has that weird trigger, weird safety device, just slightly different geometry, it doesn't lend itself easily to being made to run really fast or with an FRT in it. Because of that, you'd have to have something that was specifically made for the KH9. I'm not sure if that will be done. Probably AS Designs, if anybody's going to do it, is likely going to get their hands on it and try it. But that was the real bummer. And trying to get FRTs for this thing to show you guys how cool it could be, we ran into some issues in terms of trigger geometry and receiver geometry. So hopefully AS Designs will get on that and make this really cool, because I think this thing would be absolutely phenomenal with an FRT. Don't you agree, Sawyer?
Dude, FRTs make everything cooler.
We agree fully. So we'll say this, the semi-auto trigger is actually really good, and the safety is very easy to actuate. A lot of newer guns, for whatever reason, especially submachine guns, tend to have the safety in a weird place. I very much so like the placement here. Now, another very odd thing about the KH9 SD is you have a split optic rail. That's due to the fact that we have the charging handle right up there. And you might not notice, but there's actually a button right here. So you can actually pull the charging handle to the rear, hit that button, you'll actually lock the charging handle to the rear to clean it or to do an administrative reload or whatever you might want to do. So you can insert your magazine. Once you insert your mag, you're simply going to rack it, and then you are nice and loaded. We don't want to roast around right into the ceiling right here, so we'll go ahead and unload that.
That'd be a legendary picture clip.
That'd be so cool. Now, moving back from here, there are a lot of different options when it comes to the end. In fact, the earlier end caps that had the stock use a TP9-like stock. Now this one obviously uses a collapsible one that you know and love. These have been used on a ton of weapons, from the APC-9K to the MP5, etc. It is a very good stock design, and I'll show you why. Once it's collapsed, all you have to do is just rip it open, and it opens up, and then it's locked. And then you hit the depress button to let it collapse again. Now, on the earlier MP5 stocks, you actually had to depress a lever to pull it out. And famously, in my old video, I simply put a little bit of tape so it can't lock in, so you can pull it out just like this one. Overall, I do find this stock design to be much better. I don't like the smaller butt pad right here, but these can be easily replaced with a variety of companies that have very good designs. Now, shooting it, what does it feel like to shoot? Well, it is very, very light on the recoil, more than an MP5 SD and more than an NPX, but still very, very good. In all of our time shooting it, I really didn't notice any problems with controllability. The biggest issue that this gun ran into was what most SD specific guns run into, which is accuracy out past about 120 yards. It becomes a little bit unpredictable due to the way that they're bleeding off the energy behind that round, which can make shot-to-shot precision a little bit lackluster. So understand that the SD guns are primarily a up and close gun, 100 yards and in, but they definitely serve a purpose. This gun is an absolute dream to shoot. This top charging handle is of course reciprocating, as a quick note. Let's talk a little bit about the setup here. So we do have iron sights that do come with the gun, and they are phenomenally well made. Up in the top here, we do have one of the older Purse Russian laser units. We have an Arasaka light on the side, and we have that pressure pad running down to our grip, our front grip right here. On the back, we have an Aimpoint Comp M5, and these are some of our favorite optics. The M5 and the M5S are absolutely incredible. So these guns do come in at very expensive, about 3,000 plus, and they're going up in price due to the fact that there just weren't a whole lot made. And we do have more imports coming in terms of the KH45 SD and probably more KH9 SDs, but you just have to realize you are paying a premium for something like this, but in our opinion, it is a very, very cool gun. Functions very well. I really don't think you can ever go wrong with getting one of the B&T pistol caliber carbines, whether that be the KH9, the KH9 SD, etc., etc. They are all phenomenally made, and we absolutely love them. In all my time shooting this, I've really come to fall in love with it. It's definitely high on the list for guns I'll continue to shoot and continue to use quite heavily, just because of how well it's engineered, how good it feels to shoot, and just the sound signature really does tickle my fancy. Not the quietest out there, but still so close that I do find that it would be a really effective weapon for some of those bad days. Overall, guys, that brings us to the end of the KH9 SD. What we'll say about it is the cost is high. We think it's worth it. However, if you were to get one of the less expensive pistol caliber carbines from B&T, like the KH9, I think you're going to be just as happy. But if you really need to have something that just says, hey, welcome back, Thompson submachine gun, well, this gun is absolutely for you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. We got nothing else for you. Final thing for you guys is going to be, you know what? Your kids are going to sick and you're going to get sick. That's part of having kids. You're going to have to learn to deal with it. We don't know what to tell you. Drink elderberry tea and eat vitamin C.
You can do it.